This is Health and Fitness Redefined, brought to you by Redefine Fitness. Hello and welcome to the brand new Anthony Amen Show. Yes, you heard Health and Fitness Redefined earlier. We have not had a chance to edit that. Full disclosure, I just like being honest. So that is in the works, but we are officially moving forward with a brand new show to bring you more topics outside of health and wellness. Do a little more personal about how I feel about specific situations and just help broaden our horizons a little more about who I am, what I believe in, what I don't believe in, when it's just useless garbage. So with that as a great topic, this dives into today's guest. Jen Trepik is on the show today, and she has an awesome book that is out, Uncomplicating Wellness. And I think that's basically the moral of her book is everything is full of shit, and we need to change how we think about health and wellness as a whole. So welcome to the show, Jen. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much. It's fun to talk again.
Yeah. I hope that was a great introduction to your book, and everyone's now super excited about why I said all of that.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot in there that is sort of calling out the BS and letting everyone decide for themselves. I think there's so much coming at us that we end up with like this shiny object syndrome, and we stop trusting ourselves and our instincts and knowing what we already know about our own bodies. And this Uncomplicating Wellness is your permission to do what you know works for you and forget everything else.
I love it. So before we dive into the book itself, tell me a little bit of what made you want to write it.
Yeah. So I started health coaching back in 2007. And over the years, and then my podcast, Salad with a Side of Fries, started in 2019. And what I've noticed since 2007, and then certainly since 2019, is that the questions people ask are more and more in the weeds. And fundamentally, what I've come to decide more or less, or really see, is no one needs more information. We are actually in information overload, and we don't need a new plan. We need a new lens through which to evaluate all of the information coming at us and the multitude of plans that are out there to choose from. And so
I don't know if
this
you
book
heard
is
the news,
designed
but
to
every
be that.
plan is super special and super important, and
Right,
every
yeah.
diet is the best thing on God's green earth.
Totally. Yes. Headlines everywhere. Yeah.
Exactly. Every new fad, every new thing, it's like, oh, here we go. And my friend told me this worked. How many times have you heard that? But I didn't mean to cut you off. I just totally agree.
No, but to your point, this worked. Okay, well, let's just pause for a hot second. How do you define worked? How do we even realize or think about that we're going after the same objective? Like, work to you means what? And work to your friend, worked to that influencer or that diet plan or that company that's selling you something. What does worked mean to them? We assume that it means the same thing, that what we're looking for, but it probably doesn't. And I don't mean this in a malicious way, because I am in this wellness industry. I work with supplements in my practice and with my clients. So I think the piece for people to really wrap their heads around is that their objective is potentially not yours. Because when they're selling you something, their objective, especially if it's sold or marketed to us as a miracle cure or the only thing you need or the simplest thing you've ever done, right? Their objective is to get you fast results. I don't know about you, but my clients and I am looking for long-term results and results that lead to health as the end game. And what it turns out, we know from all of the research ever and more and more and more recently, that for us to have those healthful outcomes, for results to be long term, how we get there is the difference maker. And so if their objective is short-term results so that you buy again, so that you say it worked and share it with your friend, right? Then when it doesn't work long term, you think you failed. But that wasn't their goal. Their goal was to get you fast results, which they did. It just wasn't what you were looking for. So there's a piece in the beginning of the book, especially where it's like, let's just pause for a hot second, define for yourself what wellness is to you, what the outcomes are that you're looking for. And then we can use that as one of the metrics for deciding all of the things and asking some pointed questions about the options that are available instead of just accepting the marketing that is designed to sell us something and to make us feel like we're broken.
Yeah, this is a double-edged sword, right? So there's something called the value equation, and it's basically how people determine value in something. One of the key factors in the value equation is speed and hardship. And this is the hardest thing about being in nutrition and fitness is we can get you the results you want, which is going to add value, but it's going to be a long process and it's going to be really freaking hard because you're going to have to work on it 24/7. It's not mind numbing. Let me just do this for you. And now I have a higher perceived value because it's taken care of. And it's why most people shift to things like Ozempic because the pain level of Ozempic is easy. It's a shot and then
Ish.
you're done. Ish. Yeah. But that's a good, easy step, like what they have to accomplish, as opposed to a grueling 45-minute workout and then redoing their entire thing as far as what they know about nutrition and understanding it. And then the education and speed process of it, it's a lot quicker, Ozempic, because it forces you to not eat and you starve. So now you're just dropping weight down that way, as opposed to truly developing a habit plan and building foundational habits, which take a
Right.
long time to do. Some people can take up to 2 years to develop a habit. It's not this 90 days. Each person just is different. That's just a general average. So
Right.
it's hard as a company to sell something. This is going to absolutely suck and take a long time to do, but it's super valuable because it's changing your life in the long term. And people don't see the value in that. But then as a consumer side, they want the quick results. They want to go to the thing that's going to be the easiest to do, and they want to avoid pain as much as possible because that's just human nature as a whole.
Well, I think there's a few pieces to that. One is I think it's a misconception that in order to get results, it requires every day be the most intense, insane workout of your life. And that to be healthy, it requires a level of commitment that's 8,000% every minute of your life. I think that's fucked. No offense. And like, that's part of how we got to this place. So I think that's a giant misconception also. And with, you know, Ozempic or whatever you want to call as the easy button, for every gimme, there's a gotcha. You just have to go into it knowing what that gotcha is and choose that too. So if the gimme you're doing is Ozempic or any GLP-1 or, Zepbound or any of them. Now, for some people, they are life-changing and can be incredibly helpful. At the same time, there are 100% zero diseases that exist only in bigger bodies. So one of the other misconceptions is that simply making the number on the scale go down, having less gravitational pull on your being, means you are healthier. And that is false, patently false. So if then our objective is to reduce illness, disease, and symptoms, if our objective is to be able to get off the toilet ourselves later in life, then potentially muscle wasting because we're more or less not eating. And when we do eat, we're not necessarily choosing nutrients because those are far less interesting foods, especially when we aren't really hungry. There's a trade-off. As long as you're choosing that trade-off and owning it, more power to you. I think the challenge is that we aren't realizing that there is that trade-off. And, in the US, it is now the standard of care for anything weight related to prescribe one of these medications. Instead of educating our physicians, instead of helping people understand nutrition and biology, and lifestyle choices, because our physicians don't have the time to do that, right? Like they have to see 6 patients an hour to keep the lights on. So it's the pharmaceutical industry, it's our medical industry, it's the health insurance industry that has pushed us to this place where the average person has to understand that their health is theirs to create. It is not their doctors, it is not the pharmaceutical, it is theirs to take ownership of. And it happens in the seemingly small things that we do every day, not the big things. Our health is really the function of what we do most of the time. And what we do most of the time is the small stuff that we tend to ignore. So if we can make some tweaks in our daily choices, we can end up with actually tremendous results.
Right. So I'm gonna reiterate my point that I made prior. Yeah. So it's not grueling workouts all the time. It's breaking a former habit that feels like a grueling workout. So as an example,
Yes.
if my habit lock is I'm gonna have a muffin every morning for breakfast, breaking that's hard. It's extremely tough for somebody to go from a high sugar diet, which all these foods are programmed to make you addicted to them. So you're fighting an addiction, which is what it is, to change to eat or do things something smaller. To tell someone that walks maybe, and this is real numbers, 500, 600 steps a day, which is nothing, to now walk 1,000, you're asking for double the output, even though that 1,000 is still way below benchmark of what they need to be doing. And that in and of itself is hard because they have built their life around a singular habit and these multiple habits. Now you're fighting against, to your point, which I agree with, now you're fighting against false information from the doctors because they're overwhelmed. You're fighting against the pharmaceutical companies that want you to come in. You're fighting against a system that was built on bad information. You're fighting against your friends who are giving you bad information. And on top of all of that, you have a whole health and wellness network, which is booming. There's more money in health and wellness now than ever has in the lifetime of humans.
Correct.
With so much information, it's so hard to pick out what the fuck do I listen to?
Which is why I wrote this book, because that's the point. It's if we listen to everyone else, this feels like climbing Mount Everest naked and barefoot. And everyone around us is going, climb. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you climbing? And you're like, are you kidding me? Right. So when we can start to scale back, we can decide that it's actually not that hard. If we figure out how to approach it and have some strategies and tools that aren't a massive overhaul where we're expecting ourselves to flip a switch. And part of that is even just in, deciding or recognizing that this is important to you. Because P.S., if it's not, keep eating your muffin, do your thing. No one can make you do something you don't want to do. So once we decide that this is something that is important, that we want to think about, then the piece that I think is also misconstrued is willpower and motivation. Because we think we have to have this mindset first. We think that the reason why we're not doing something or we do it one day and not the next day is because we lack willpower or we're not motivated. And the truth is, we've just been sold another load of bullshit about what those things are, that motivation comes first, or that it's willpower that you're lacking. You don't lack willpower. We just use that in other areas of our life. And now we're going to look at applying some here or adding some tools to our day to increase our willpower. And the sugar cravings are very physiological. Yes, to your point, there's an addictive piece to it. And it is biochemical with hormones like leptin and ghrelin and nutrient deficiency and gut bacteria that have us craving those foods. So if we want to start to make moves in the direction of some different choices, what we think starts out as motivation is not. It starts out as discipline. It starts out as a decision and a commitment. And then playing with it. Just try it. Do it for a few days and see how you feel. Because here's the other thing. So the vagus nerve is the literal connection between the gut and the brain. We know serotonin and a lot of these neurotransmitters that help us feel good are made in the gut. Well, 3 of the lanes, think of the vagus nerve as a 5-lane highway. 3 of those lanes go gut to brain. 2 go brain to gut. So you will never outthink the biochemistry of what you are feeding your body. So if we can recognize that, then say, okay, what I actually just need to do is commit to the protein-packed breakfast with some fiber, and then see how I feel. Once we experience that benefit, then the mindset changes. Then we have different, clearer thinking where we can then end up in that feedback loop between the gut and the brain where everything's moving in the same direction. But I don't think that other than a decision or a commitment to experiment with something different is what's required to get started.
Yeah. Let me say something which I've been on a kick for the last 2 weeks.
Can't wait.
Motivation is pointless. And I couldn't agree more. What we lack, and you mentioned willpower and motivation, I think the key is what we lack is discipline, is having the discipline to continue things and to keep pushing, even though we do not see the instant gratification results given to us. Our society and technology is heavily built on instant gratification with everything we do. And it's just getting worse with technology. And as kids, parents are becoming softer on kids and lacking discipline. This trickles into adulthood, and you're seeing that more with how people are acting. Not taking their own accountability for what's going on to themselves, but blaming other people. A good example of this is nutrition. People seem to blame the government for nutrition. Do they have a role in the factor? Maybe the education part is wrong. I could agree with that. But is the government watching you put food in your mouth? Is the government pulling all the healthy food off the grocery shelf? Or are you choosing to make those decisions? You could blame your parents that it was their fault for not teaching you. But you're an adult. So are your parents yet again doing that example as the government? No, I think it all comes from personal accountability and wanting to make that decision to make ourselves happy, because we keep looking for outside help and we blame external factors when really we have to look inside to make those changes.
Yeah, we do. And that's not to say, to your point, there is a role that government and regulation plays in this. And it's part of the problem because we're one of a handful of countries where the nutritious choices are more expensive than those that lack nutrition, because the chemicals are way less expensive than an actual apple grown in the ground until it's ripe.
I disagree with that point. I had this argument with the trainer.
So here's, well, let me explain, right?
Yeah, go for it.
Food additives are less expensive. The foods don't go bad as easily. They last longer. That is in business interest to use those ingredients and make those foods. It is infinitely more and more difficult for farmers to make a living and make ends meet without using tons of other chemicals to make their food bigger and prettier, or cutting costs on what they're feeding their plants or animals. Like all of these things play into it. And it's really, to me, it's the incentive structure around our food industry that is part of the problem. That there are no consequences to mass producing and emphasizing the foods that contribute to illness and disease. And there are things that aren't labeled and aren't labeled properly. So alcohol, I was just having this conversation yesterday. Alcohol is a category 1 carcinogen. That's not labeled anywhere. And why not? Because there's a lot of money in not labeling that. There's a lot of money in not sharing that information. So it's the incentive structure and the way things are happening that subconsciously and underhandedly guide some of these choices. 1,000%, it is up to us what we pull off that shelf in a grocery store. And it is up to us to be able to understand those differences, which we don't, because it looks like an apple. It smells like an apple, but our body doesn't even recognize it as an apple because of how it was grown. It doesn't have the same nutrients that an apple did 50 years ago. So there's just more to it than saying you suck because you chose the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think it's more of people not understanding what is right, people lacking the discipline to do what is right. But I think it's all fixable with the right people surrounding them. So the biggest, easiest way to change a person in any category, irregardless what it is, if you want to learn something, this is the life hack I've been preaching to everybody. Whatever you want, let's say as a Tinder sample is eating healthier. The quickest way to eat healthier is not opening your computer, not deep diving into research. It's go hang out with 5 people that eat healthy already and just spend your day with them. The quickest way to get financial success is to go hang out with people who are financially successful, and you pick up on those habits. But going back to the point of foods being more expensive that are healthier as opposed to unhealthier, this is a harder thing to answer than just black and white. Something's organic, it's more expensive than something that's not organic. That is something
I'm
I
not
can
even
definitely
arguing that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell, right? You go into a store, a bag of chips is cheaper than chicken. Duh. We can all see that. Where it's misaligned is multi-factored. The first factor, from an entrepreneurial sense, because it's kind of what I want to take the show in itself, it's actually cheaper for someone like me, or for most people that work, to go out to eat and to order food to go. Is it cheaper when you look at it pennies to pennies? So the food that I'm buying compared to the food that I'm eating? No, it is not cheaper, but it is cheaper in opportunity cost. How much time did I spend going to the grocery store, picking this stuff out, driving to and from, prepping the food, cooking the food, eating the food, cleaning it up? If I take all those hours congruents together and add that to the cost of what the groceries cost me and figure out a per hour rate off of that, it is actually a lot cheaper for somebody like me to go out and eat often. This even breaks down to a psychological stance where it costs roughly $15 an hour for someone to go and get food. And you do that about per day, it ends up being 1, 2, 7, 14, about 18 hours a week. So $15 an hour, 18 hours a week, you times that out, you could work a couple extra hours and save more time just by going out to eat and ordering the right foods. So that's step one of choosing
even
that.
on that. Now, I live in New York City. I rarely have groceries in my house. I am of the ilk that like I order most food. At the same time, I think it's also a misconception that grocery shopping, right? Like you could use Instacart. It takes me 15, 20 minutes total if I do grocery shopping. It takes me 15, 20 minutes, and that lasts me, 2 weeks of groceries. The amount of time that it actually takes to prep something. Now, I call it making something to eat, not really cooking, right? But it doesn't take me all that long. Start to finish, it's less time actually than what I spend when I'm scrolling to decide what I'm ordering, and then I'm eating what I ordered and cleaning that up. So it's kind of depends on the person with that. And there is, though, the opportunity cost, and everybody just gets to decide that for themselves. There are also choices that happen. Like when I'm eating from a restaurant, which I do every single day, right? Like there are trade offs to that. They're cooking with things that I wouldn't necessarily cook with if I was buying the groceries.
It's true.
It's all just trade offs and making that decision and figuring out what's going to work for you in your life at this moment. Because I also think that that changes over time too, that what works right now, your capacity could change in a week, a month, a year, a decade.
Yeah, and obviously this is one example of
Yeah.
many of the reasons of multi-factor where it's harder to just say one is worth the other. The other one
Yeah.
being, and this is more of people that have the free time and luxury to do this. Obviously, someone living in the city, much more different scenario than those living out in rural for this one, where you could grow your own food, you can hunt your own
Right.
food. You still have the capability of doing that. We forget as humans that grocery stores haven't been around that long in the existence of human beings. So it's relatively free to grow your own stuff and to hunt for your own food. So for those in rural communities, there really is no excuse about expense on that side of it. And then you don't have to spray it with pesticides because it's your own food. The second side of that is it's if you narrow down choices when you are shopping at a grocery store, that's something you need to do. And you just be pickier as far as buying things more in bulk and sticking to things that are generally healthy, that are cheaper. A good example of this is rice. Rice is a very cheap commodity to buy, especially in bulk. Something like that, and divide it out properly and shortening your meals to less variety, because variety is what makes going out grocery shopping more expensive, because now you need more ingredients to fill it in. It actually still ends up working on a per week basis to be cheaper, even though it's healthier food as opposed to non-healthier food. So, but the
I mean,
moral of all of
I
this, there's
believe
examples and things.
for sure. Although, with that said, I think variety is an underrated tool when it comes to overall health. We need a variety of nutrients. If we're eating the same foods all the time, then we have to have a greater commitment to supplementation to get us the other nutrients that we're not getting from those handful of foods.
Well, you just same breakfast every morning, same different lunch, but same lunch across the week. Same dinner, but different than what lunch was across the week, and you'll have no problem having a balanced meal.
It's not about a balanced meal. It's about over life, over time, giving the body all of the macro and micronutrients that we need. If we're always eating this, chicken, rice, and broccoli, there are thousands of nutrients that you're not getting
But
when
is
it
that
comes to
better or worse than
phytonutrients and
them eating
micronutrients.
unhealthier
It's
food because it's cheaper?
it's more a function of trade-offs. And for every gimme, there's a gotcha, and just choosing it with intention and understanding where we're at. Because, by the way, I see just as many health issues, they're just different, in people who come to me who eat 5 foods.
Yeah, and it's just a difference of how you're looking at things and how you're perceiving things. And there's always trade-offs to everything in life. But if someone told me to eat 5 foods to save money because it's cheaper, I'd rather them that than going to buy the same unhealthy foods they have been eating that have no nutritional value. And I agree. The point being, I just don't like generics. I don't
Yes.
like that one's cheaper than the other. But I want to branch into something that you did mention in your book that I couldn't agree more with. And it's been an argument that I've had with tons of people in this industry. It's the reference of calories, like no calories are
Ugh.
equal. And
Yeah.
everyone always says the same example that 1,200 calories of Oreos is equivalent to 1,200 calories of eggplant. I just
It's
couldn't
not.
disagree
And
more.
we all know that. And a 5-year-old knows that. Like, the way that I think people come back to is like, would you tell your kid, yes, eat Oreos all day as long as you're only eating, this many total? No, you would not. no matter what level of education you have, no matter how much nutrition knowledge you have, or you have ever been taught, or ever read, or learned, or whatever, you know that, Skittles are not the same as carrots. So, full stop, it's not calories. And that's also not how the body works. Like, we all know this.
I'll even add, good luck eating 1,200 calories of carrots straight.
Yeah, that too.
Like, you're going to be so full.
I
You're
also
can't
say,
eat
like,
another one.
don't recommend that either. But,
Of
like,
course.
right? But it's just so funny to me. And, the sad part with that guideline of, eat less, move more, because calories seem to be all that anybody, we end up with this idea that in order to make the scale move, we have to keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And I meet people who are eating maybe 900 calories a day. And it's like, this is why your body is holding on to fat. This is why you're not getting to where you want to be. And we have created a situation where people are so afraid of food because we told them that the number one thing that matters is calories.
Yeah, I mean, I
And
like
by
the
we, it's
example
not
of
we.
protein. No, I understand. I like the example of protein,
Yeah.
and I think it's something I've been harping on a lot, but I just really want to get the point across how no all calories are created equal. There's something called the thermal effect, and I know you're very aware of this, but protein has extremely high thermal effect, meaning how much energy it takes for our body to digest a single gram of protein. And 20 to 30% of that on average is just wasted out just to use as burned energy. So you can't even say that a gram of protein is equivalent to a gram of carbs, because even though calorically wise a 4 to 4 is the same, you're using 20 to 30% of that 4 calories for that protein to burn it off. So therefore, it's actually less than what a true gram of carb would look like. And it adds such an important factor to why I don't even, when we recommend protein, even put calories associated with it. I just tell people, eat your protein goal, because 99% of Americans undereat the amount of protein they should be eating because we of wrong nutrition labels and just not understanding what a protein is. And if you just did that, you'd be so full that you would have to worry about anything else.
Well, and also our sugar cravings are often connected to undereating protein. So if you're challenged by sugar, just see what happens if you start eating more protein. So I don't talk about calories ever with my clients. What we talk about is serving sizes. So a serving size of protein at a meal is your whole hand, like the whole hand. For a biologically female body, that's generally 4 to 6 ounces. For a male body, that's 6 to 8 ounces. And then for everybody, a snack is the palm or a little less, which is generally about 2 to 3 ounces.
And then for Anthony, it's 3 hands. And that's what equivalent is to a singular meal of protein.
I mean, but consider, right, if that, there are also trade-offs. And for biologically female bodies, there's a lot more that we need to think about. But if we're eating also magnitudes of that, that's coming at the expense of what? What aren't we eating because we're eating that? So we need to make sure that we're getting protein, fiber, quality fat, hitting those macronutrients. Protein is your clean, lean protein. Fiber is vegetables and fruit. Quality fat, like a serving of avocado, is half of the avocado. Olive oil, walnuts, almonds, sardines, anchovies. Like, I know nobody likes those, but they're important. But hitting those pieces help ensure that everything in the body functions. So if we're way off the deep end in any one of those categories, it's generally coming at the expense of another. So it's just an awareness factor for us to say, what am I eating? What am I not eating? If what we're not eating is grains and starch, but we are getting our carbohydrates through fiber-rich foods like vegetables and fruit, we're great. We're hitting those nutrients and those phytonutrients and micronutrients that we need. what I generally see is not that people are overeating the protein, is that they're overeating the grains and the starches. They've become addicted to how that feels in their system. And that then perpetuates this cycle of feeling challenged by making other choices.
Yeah, it's a giant clusterfuck. I just can't think of a better word than what.
But so that's the point of these conversations, is to clear the cobwebs, right? To start to pull the string so it doesn't feel like a clusterfuck anymore, and to do the things that you know work for you to feel your best. And if you're not feeling your best, if you are not waking up with energy, if you don't have energy all day, if you aren't tired at an appropriate time in the evening, then it's fair to say, all right, we maybe have to look at something. We maybe have to tweak and figure out, what's the piece that I haven't quite figured out yet? And what makes sense for me to play with based on what I know to be true? And so you have permission to ignore every headline and, frankly, anything we're saying if it contradicts what you know to be true for you.
Yeah, I can see that, with the exception of people who really don't know what they think they know what they're doing. And I take that to not our generation, but the generation that's older than us, where I just don't know, where information is harder to absorb. And I feel like they get lost with what's fair, because maybe those habits are so far sunken in because they've been doing it for so long. Like, I think
I work with a
about,
lot of people in that demo, and it comes back to the same thing of, like, if they are seeing in their health the outcome of all of those steps, they sit here and go, okay, there's something I don't know yet. Let's work on this.
yeah, I'm
It
more
comes
like,
back to that same piece of, like, are you making the decision? Are you saying this is a priority and I want to do something about it?
yeah, if they're open and willingness to listen, and right,
Yeah.
that's the first step. You have to be open and willingness to listen. It's just more, I know back in like the 80s when Coca-Cola just told the world that sugar is not the thing getting everyone fat, it's fats. And we need to now do
Right.
low fat diets. And I know some people conforming
Oh,
to that.
Snackwells.
And
My family did every fad diet under the sun. We low fat, no fat, the Snackwells generation, right? Like, we did all the things. We had everything in my house.
yeah, it's just, I want that message really to hit them home more. Is like, just be more open to change and understand that information over the years changes. I mean, I know you agree, nutrition changes every single day. The general understanding of it is there, but when you get into the weeds, as we learn as a species of what actually helps us thrive, it's generally changes almost daily, hourly, sometimes it feels like, as far as advice. But to the point over on nutrition counseling, where it's more habit focused instead of calorie focused, is where you're really going to see true change, because you're going to really deep dive into fixing your day-to-day routines and really optimizing who you are as an individual. Is there anything else in the book that you specifically wanted to bring up and address that you found to be one of the most important things?
Well, so part of what I'm hearing as people read it is, so the first half is a lot of, not even half, the first section is really what we've been talking about today, kind of dispelling these ideas, understanding how we got to this point. I offer, like, my top 5 tips for digesting nutrition news, which are ways to approach things with a bit of skepticism, and to ask questions, to push back, and to evaluate rather than just accept everything that is thrown at us. And then the second section is what we call biostack over biohack. And that's what we've been talking about, of building this foundation before adding on some of these other things, because a biohack by definition is an incremental increase. Well, statistically, 12% of the US population is metabolically well. So if 88% of us aren't metabolically well, it means maybe we're at like 30, 40% health. Well, a 10% increase is not moving the needle. Of course, we aren't noticing that much of a difference. So if we can use a biostack of 6 specific things that I'll talk about in a second, if we can get our foundation in place, then we can add the biohack and go from 80 to 88 or 90 to 99. And now we're talking, oh my goodness, I feel like a different person with a 10% increase. So the bio stack is nutrition, as we've been talking about, movement, as we touched on briefly, hydration, which is about more than water, stress management, sleep, and connection. We need to have something of all of those areas in our daily lives for wellness, however you define it, and you get to define it. And then we walk through some of the indicators that we're probably ignoring of our body communicating with us and helping us understand maybe which of those pieces deserve our attention first as we build out that stack. And then people love part 4, which is what I call, but what about? And that's the stuff that everybody asks about. What about intermittent fasting? What about cold plunges? What about breakfast? What about coffee? What about all of the things that are in the weeds, but they're very short, couple sentences to just get us over that hump of thinking that those things are the big movers. It's really the bio stack that are the big movers. And so if any of what we've talked about is sort of resonating, or you're going, I kind of want to think about that more, or wait, I never thought about that piece of this, then this book is 1,000% for you. Let it uncomplicate what feels like climbing Mount Everest naked and barefoot.
Yeah, it's always, but what about this? I love that, the but what about, because
Yeah.
it's so true. Every time I get drilled with a million questions, like, let's fix walking, and then we'll worry about this specific food that you like to eat once a week.
Exactly.
That's one little thing of that. And I like the stacking. I'll just add, which you mentioned last, but I think that's the most important.
It is
And
the
that's
most overlooked.
connection is huge because it stacks into how to change a habit, and it's hanging out with people that are like-minded of the habit you're trying to accomplish. And that alone will solve everything else. Everything else will just start falling into place. And if you truly want to make a change in your health, just start hanging out with healthy people. Like, that's as simple as it is, because they're going to want to do eating healthier foods, sleeping better, watching their digestion, whatever, like hydrating themselves. You're going to just start noticing them doing all this stuff, and all those habits will just start picking up on and becoming more like them just by fixing that one last piece of information you talked about. And it's just so important. If you feel like you don't have people in your personal life, join groups, like virtual or in person. Join a gym. You'll start hanging with people that cover most of those. Like, join a nutrition counseling group. You'll start picking up from all of them. There's so many avenues you could reach out to people to get help from. And you're not in this alone. And here's a hack I learned a while back. You don't have to physically hang out with somebody to feel like you're hanging out with them. And what I mean by that, it's the amount of content and hours you feel like you spend with somebody to feel like you get to know them and you're going to pick on their habits. A great example of this is books and podcasts. If you keep reading and listening to the same individual over and over and over and over again, you're going to feel like you know them and start picking up on their habits and things they say and understand how they talk. And you're going to become more like them without ever meeting them a day in your life. So books like yours, podcasts like this, depending on what you're looking for, is how you really make a quick change. And the best part is, it's all free. It's all that information's out there. All you got to do is look it up and find it and follow and share.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Jen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I really appreciate you talking about this. I think it's super important. I think people should go find your book, pick it up, read it, because that is the first step in getting in all this. And I'll let you tell us where to do all of that. But I do want to ask you 2 final questions that I ask everybody on this show. The first one is, if you were to summarize this episode in 1 or 2 sentences, what would be your take home?
It doesn't have to be complicated.
Short and sweet. I love that. And then how can people find your book and learn more about you and your show?
Absolutely. So the show is Salad with a Side of Fries. So wherever you like to listen, you can search for it. Website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. Book details are available there or wherever you like to buy books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, whatever makes you happy. Just search for Uncomplicating Wellness. And all social media, I am at Jen Trepik, JENNTREPECK. Please send a message. I love hearing from you, your takeaways, your questions, what resonated with you, what didn't. Let's have a chat and connect. So please reach out.
Jen, thank you so much for coming. Thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of The Anthony Amon Show. It will say Health and Fitness at the end, but it's The Anthony Amon Show. So when you're looking it up, don't forget to find that. Until next time, and don't forget, fitness is... Thank you guys for listening to this week's episode of Health and Fitness Redefined. Please don't forget to subscribe and share this show with a friend, with a loved one, for those that need to hear it. And ultimately, don't forget, fitness is medicine. I'll see you next time.